All right, welcome to another episode of Ardent TV. I am Tom Traplin. I'm the marketing manager here at Ardent Mortgages, and I have with me once more my compatriot. What's your name?
Joseph. Once more makes it sound like this is the last time. It's not the last time. Again, as always.
The final time.
Yeah. I'm Joseph Riccardi here, the principal broker here at Ardent Mortgages. And today, Tom, what are we going to be talking about?
Well, we're going to try and answer the question. The question is, how is it a good investment to buy a house or get a mortgage for a house when you're going to end up paying almost double over the course of that mortgage? So why is it a good idea to get a house, to get a mortgage? We're going to try and convince you as to why it makes sense, why it's a good idea. So what's the first part?
Well, I'd like to, if it's okay with you, I'd like to...
Always.
Listen to what I say before you say yes.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
I want to quickly brush through the 3 points and then come back to each of them. So just quickly highlight all of them for everybody.
We'll give you a brief overview.
So the brief overview for the first 3 points, and there's a magical fourth point that we're going to talk about at the end, apparently. So the first 3 points are: you get a place to live, you get an appreciating asset, and you stop paying rent. So those are the 3 things that we're going to talk about when, in conjunction with why is it a good or bad idea to buy a house when in the long run, with interest taken into consideration, you pay almost double.
Okay. So number 1, you get a place to live. Everybody needs somewhere to live.
And this is the big thing. And a lot of these points are compounded. That's why I want to address all 3 at the same time, because they're all relative to each other.
Yeah,
and related, exactly. So you get a place to live. Everybody needs a place to live. It's not like it's a car where you can get by without a car. You need a roof over your head. There's almost no exceptions to that. So one way or another, you're going to have to pay for some sort of shelter.
You're either going to be paying for your apartment or you're going to be paying your mortgage. You got to choose one.
Common sense to me is always, you would rather own an asset than borrow it, right? Or lease it, or whatever else you want to call it. It almost always makes more sense to own. So that bleeds directly into point number 2, especially if that asset is an appreciating asset.
Yep.
Right?
And this is where it differs from owning a car versus owning a house, too, right?
And to dive that directly into point number 3 immediately, why do you want to pay rent when you're paying for someone else's mortgage? And that's the argument everybody has heard. I should stop hitting the desk. I'm probably making loud thump noises with that. Thank you, microphone. But again, why do you want to pay someone else's mortgage off when you could be paying your own debt down and creating that appreciating asset for yourself? Mm-hmm. So I think, in a nutshell, that kind of addresses all 3 points.
Yeah, no, I think those are all legitimate points that you should consider when that justifies the extra money, which is what we're going to talk about in a second, that you're paying for this house, right? If you're looking at using today's example, Southern Ontario, Kitchener Market, looking at a house for $400,000, if you get a mortgage for that house, you're probably going to end up paying between $700 and $800 in total over the 30
year or
years.
25-year amortization or whatever the case.
Yeah, whatever it ends up being, that's probably what you're looking at.
And here's my counter argument to that, and please, I am interested in your comments on this. If you have the cash to pay for the house up front right now, absolutely do it. Not a lot of people have $400,000 up front. And then I'm going to go one step further and say, even if you did have the cash up front to buy the house, you still want to leverage your investment so that you can invest in other. You don't have to put the whole $400 into that one home. You can reinvest it in other avenues that are going to have a greater return. So,
yeah, and all of that's true.
There's
it's
all
all true, but that's you have to get into a risk profile and stuff like that. And for some people, being mortgage free is way more important, knowing that you have the consistency, you have the reliability, that you're not going to have this expense, like that kind of thing. For those people, that's your highest value. It's not about getting the return. It's about stability and security, in which case, mortgage free is a great idea. If you're on the other side, you're okay with a little bit of risk, then yes, don't eliminate your mortgage immediately. Get the leverage, start investing, start trying to generate a return in some way. But yeah, no situation is necessarily better for everybody, right? That's one thing we always have to qualify. Disclaimer. Not everyone's situation is the exact same. So you need to, judge for yourself which path is right for you. But
there's a lot of comments I want to make on a lot of the things that you just said right there, because this is such a subjective topic as well.
Yeah.
The only thing I'll say to kind of finalize this, rates are going up, as we've seen in the last few months, but they're still, in the grand scheme, very, very low right now, and I'm referring to mortgage interest rates on houses. So that's also part and parcel as to why the prices are so high, because rates are so low. So it all boils back down into it folds over on itself, and I'll leave it at that for now, because we can get into a long discussion on this. But with rates being as low as they are, you're not, even though you're spending, let's even call it exactly twice what it would cost you to buy the house right now.
Sure.
You're getting the asset right now up front, and then this will lead into our final point, which I'll let you introduce.
Which is you have to factor in inflation. That's one of the things it's an economic factor that most people kind of forget about. You don't really think of inflation over time when you're thinking about, spending money and buying things. It's not something that we factor into our everyday life. But when you're talking about a 30-year amortized loan, right?
Yep.
Something that you're going to pay over a very long period of time.
I prefer to refer to it as an investment rather than a loan. But
sure, you end up with something that's an appreciating asset.
And it
is a debt that you have to pay, and you are paying interest on that loan.
And in my opinion, there are three things to take into consideration when looking at that on its own. Is the interest rate that you're paying on the mortgage itself. Mm-hmm. Number two is the rate at which the property is increasing. So let's use today's figures, and let's be conservative with today's figures. So we're going to inflate the expenses and deflate the positives, the assets, or whatever else you want to.
Sure.
The increases. So
we're going to lowball it.
We're going to lowball everything. We're going to be conservative. So let's say that right now average interest rates on a mortgage are we're going to go as high as 4.5%. Okay?
Sure.
And it's an interesting time in the market right now. We're in Kitchener. We're going to talk about Kitchener.
Yeah.
Prices in Kitchener are, or property values in Kitchener are increasing right now on an average of 17%. Okay, so look at the spread between the 4.5 to the 17 right there, and then let's take inflation into consideration. And what's inflation? 1 and let's call it 2.
Maybe 3%, somewhere in that range.
We're going to inflate it as well, because that's what we're doing here. So we're going to call it 3%. So even if you took the 2, the 4 and the 3, and you take the 17 and drop it down to 10, you still have a spread of 3%. Increase on all of this that's higher than typically the interest rate you're paying right now, which would be around 3%, even though we're calling it 4.5%. So,
but the real point is, even if you took out the fact that your house is appreciating,
true. I'm sorry,
but even if you took out the fact that the house is appreciating, you take out the fact that you just say the price is what it is, it stayed the exact same. It wouldn't appreciate in the sense. Or it would appreciate in the sense that the market is valuing higher, but inflation would also kind of appreciate it in a way as well, because the price will gradually rise with inflation. So at the end of the 30 years, though, the idea, though, is that, say you pay $400,000 for your mortgage, $400,000 now is about the equivalent of $800,000 in 30 years, give or take. Well, maybe it's like 20 years. You have to crunch the math, but the point is inflation and the double payment, the fact that you're paying double for the value of the home. It works out. It's basically the same.
And I'll just, last point, because we're rambling a bit, and we might want to cut some of these.
We'll probably turn this down.
But last point on this is when you compare vehicle loans versus loans on homes as well, sometimes, in not all cases, but let's just go with an average vehicle loan, you are actually paying much more interest on a car than you would on a house, which is a depreciating asset as well. If it makes sense to do it for a car, then obviously it makes sense to do it for an appreciating asset like a home as well, where in the long run, there's no guarantees ever, but almost exclusively, if you look at the trend in real estate back to forever ago to now, it's always an upward increase of value trend. Exactly. So yes, it makes sense.
Yeah, and there's a time value to money. It's always better to have the thing now than it is to have the thing in 30 years. It would be talking something completely different if this was a layaway plan.
Yeah.
Where you say, I'm going to put down a little bit of money now, and in 30 years, I'll finally get to live in the house. Yep. Totally different conversation. The fact is you get it now, and you get to appreciate it now, and you get to enjoy the appreciation now.
That's correct.
Over the entire length of the loan, and that's why it makes sense. So if you have any questions, if we screwed up anything and you want to correct us, please do.
You mean anything we screwed up? Please.
Yes, please comment.
Yeah.
Down below. Do the comment, like, subscribe, that whole YouTube thing. Thanks for joining us on Arden TV. We'll see you in the next episode.